Hi everyone, hope you guys are all having a great day today. In today's video, I'm going to cover the whole entire market in terms of the S&P 500, Dow Jones, Nasdaq, and specifically the ETFs SPY and QQQ for ETFs for S&P 500 and Nasdaq. Going to cover the economic calendar, 10-year treasury, and crude oil. So hopefully you guys like the video, hopefully you guys enjoy it. And then before I get into the analysis part in terms of support levels, price action, so on and so forth, I'm going to cover the economic calendar. So for Wednesday, May 8th, 2024, at 10 a.m., wholesale inventories comes out. At 11 a.m., Fed Vice Chair Philip Jefferson speaks. 11:45 a.m., Boston Fed President Suzanne Collins speaks. At 1:30 p.m., Fed Gov Cook speaks. Now, in terms of the 10-year Treasury, we're sitting at 4.494%. And in terms of crude oil, at $77.69 per barrel. Now, in terms of analysis, it looks like from yesterday, what I mentioned, the MACD lines actually took over for the most part. And I've seen some headlines saying that the tech sector is what's pulling us down in terms of some tech stocks. Like you saw, if you paid attention to NVIDIA, after hours and futures and pre-market, it pretty much took a hit beforehand. And again, NVIDIA is pretty much almost, I believe, it's a $2.4 trillion company, if I'm not mistaken. So it is definitely a heavy hitter. So $2.26 trillion market cap. So that will bring down the markets if it were to drop down substantially. Now, I'm not expecting it to drop down substantially. I just know that it has come down a little bit, but I know earnings is coming towards the end of the month for it. So usually for NVIDIA, it'll start ramping up before earnings anyway, regardless. So hypothetically bring up the market as a whole for the most part, potentially, because if it goes up, other tech stocks tend to follow too as well. And that is a good movement to the upside for the most part. Now, we do have CPI and PPI numbers coming next week too. So that is a little bit of a mix for the time being within this week and next week. But again, we'll see what happens for the most part. But for the MACD lines, in terms of are we moving the bearish or bullish movement, all for the S&P 500, Nasdaq, and Dow Jones for the short term, all are pointing for the downside. And we're colliding with the upward trend and downward trend resistance lines, specifically for Nasdaq. So it kind of makes sense, I guess, for the tech sector to have gotten hit, just because it's meeting a bunch of limits. Plus, we're approaching all-time highs. So all of those pretty much capping us is it's quite a bit of resistance for the most part. Now, I'm going to cover the QQQ first, then S&P 500, then Dow Jones. So in terms of the 5-year chart and 1-year chart, all showing either we're in the bearish movement, trying to cross over to a bullish movement, 1-year chart showing bullish movement. But in terms of 3, 6, and 1 month, again, they're all in the bearish movement heading to the downside. And then one thing is to 5-year chart right here for the new viewers. Since 2010, upward trend resistance line. 2020, broke through to 2022. But for the most part, as of recent, hit the upward trend resistance line and got knocked down. Now, the question is how we're going to move. Again, with this downward trend resistance line, 3 touch points, 1 false breakout. Was it going to stop us? It almost somewhat potentially did, but pretty much the sector is intersecting with this other upward trend, support / resistance. We saw resistance here, support, 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 and then resistance. And once again, we're seeing a clash, which pretty much is resistance. Now, pretty much, I guess it looks like for the most part, today and / tomorrow could be down days. And I'm going to cover the upside and downside. But if we were to head to the downside, right now we're at $440.32. Pre-market is at $437.86. If we were not to go up, pretty much it looks like if it was to go straight down for the most part, there's support in a bunch of levels beforehand, but it ultimately looks like it's going to come down to the moving average, which coincidentally goes into the pocket that I mentioned yesterday and the day before, around the $432, $433 range, give or take some change. So the moving average collides with that, and we've seen pretty much, for example, support a bunch of times right about here, 432, and then resistance 433, 432, 432. So there's support and resistance at 432, 433. I don't think we're going to go lower than that, but the problem is Nasdaq is quite volatile. So even if we did, we would drop down to the 430 anyway, which is the 439, 430. But then it dips down a little bit to the high 42 and some change. But then the moving average clips at the 429 clean, so it'll probably drop down to the 428 anyway, and then potentially bounce back up. I'm hoping we bounce back up at that pocket of 432, 433. But even if we bounce back up, because of the 6-month, 3-month, and 1-month MACD line moving averages in terms of direction, is it bearish, bullish, is to the downside, it might just be 2 days of downside. And if that is the case, hopefully it doesn't trickle down to this, but if it does, it's about 425 we could get dropped down to, and hopefully bounce off of that. But if not, we end up going back down to that $420, $421 price point, which we've seen bounce off of it. Like for example, 420 right here, 421 right here. So there is support, but the problem is I just don't want to drop down, because if we end up dropping down like that, then what happens is the CPI and PPI, the days before those reports, which is mid of next week, will still end up dropping down and maybe potentially coming back down to this level, about $413, give or take. Hopefully that is then not the case, because I want to hopefully get to all-time highs and break through those and create new all-time highs. But I don't have anything in the market, by the way, right now, and I have no option trades or any trades at all. So there's nothing influence my thought process right now for this, but everybody wants to usually break all-time highs. At least that's my opinion. Again, this is always my opinion, so please do your own due diligence and research before buying and selling. Now, in terms of SPY, we're at 500. Actually, wait to the upside first before I get to SPY. Sorry about that. In terms of the upside, again, we have to break these levels. To break these levels, we have to pretty much, for this downward trend resistance line, $440 and then $442. And then from the levels that I've mentioned before, yeah, 444, but ultimately the $446 to $448 pocket, that's going to be quite difficult to pass. We've seen multiple times horizontally right here, just spike up, get knocked down, spike up, get knocked down, multiple spike ups to get knocked down, and then the 450, give or take, for the all-time highs, regardless. Now for the SPY, we did break through the downward trend resistance line, but the problem is, again, some headlines are saying the tech sector is kind of pulling us down. We're colliding with the moving average, closed at $515.69, or not close at that, but right now at $515.77. If we were to head down, in my opinion, I think we would find support at this downward trend support line / it was a resistance, but I think it'll act as support because it collides with the moving average, and that's pretty much, for the most part, we have support at 510 and some change. We have support at 511 and some change, so pretty much between the 511 and the 512, we'll see some support regardless. We'll see some support at 515 as well, but the levels are 515, then the 511, 512, and then the 510. So I'm thinking if it's a really bad day, we'll pretty much get stuck at the 511, in my opinion, if we break through that 515. And then from there, the 510, and ultimately, worst case, 559. But then if we break through those levels, now we're getting into dangerous territory, because then if we break through that 507, we start trickling down to that 505 and 503 right about here. But if we break through those levels, I think it would be on to the next day. Worst case scenario, in my opinion, today, if we don't hover around the 511 and drop down to the 510, 509, I think we'll just stop at the 510, 509 as the worst case. Again, this is just my opinion. Now to the upside, if you think we're going to go to the upside, I don't think that's necessarily going to happen for today and tomorrow. Specifically for SPY, maybe for QQQ, somehow the tech set, well, actually it'd get carried anyway, so I guess it would be going up to the upside regardless. But just like the day before, I believe the top limit was pretty much about, first we need to pass the 518, and then once we pass the 518, we're going to get stuck between the 520 and 521. I do not think we're going to go higher, otherwise I'd cover the higher levels, but we're looking at the 520, 521 pretty much getting stopped at. And then an all-time highs for the S&P 500, or for SPY specifically, is about the $526 price point. But again, for the downside, those are the levels, and then the upside, that's what I'm expecting. Same movement for the S&P 500, in case if you're new to the channel. Since 2010, been upward trend resistance line capped, and then upward trend support level for the major level. And now for the S&P 500, we do have room to grow. So that is the difference between the S&P and Nasdaq. But yeah, there's that. Now for the Dow Jones, is a little bit different. Not exactly different, or not too much different, but somewhat different. We have the channel here. This dates back since when it first started, was March of 2021. Hit resistance going hypothetically from support. 5-year chart, 1-year chart shows the same thing as Nasdaq and S&P, which is long-term trying to curve up to the upside, already long-term somewhat cross over the bullish for the 1 year, but then 6 month and 3 month and 1 month, they are showing further downside, if that makes sense. So it's just getting started. So for the 6 month, hasn't crossed over. Nasdaq and S&P have crossed over. So it's kind of showing more of a reason why maybe the next 2 days might be down days. Maybe. The thing is though, in terms of economic calendar, there's no real reason to hypothetically go down. It's just maybe if the tech sector pulls us down, that's it. That's the only reason that I can see. Or unless there's tensions in the Middle East, that does rise. But 3 month is already in the bearish movement. 1 month is already in the bearish movement. So the question is where we're looking to move at. Right now we're at 38,873 points, give or take. And then if we were to head to the downside, we could see support based off the moving average colliding overall for all of them, plus horizontal support level around the 38,458 points. I don't think we're going to go any lower than that. And then to the upside, if we were to go higher, pretty much in the range of 39,204 points, give or take. But between the moving averages, there's quite a bit of support anyway, regardless. So yeah, 38,292 to 38,510, plus the horizontal support at the about 38,000 300 to 400 price point, give or take. If we were to drop down dramatically and hopefully bounce off the support level, we're looking at 37,490, and then to upside, I think it was 40,000. Yeah, it depends on when we hit it, but about 40,052 points, give or take. The longer we take, the higher will be, and the longer we take, the higher the low will be as well. If you believe in this support and resistance line, 2 touch points right there for the resistance. So I think it's a legit one, but either way, we'll see. And then there's multiple touch points in the past too, like I showed right about here. Going a little bit further to pull it up. So touch points right here as well. So it's not just 2, but it's a combined of 4. But yeah, that's basically it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoy it. Hope you guys like it. If you do, consider dropping a like. It does help out the channel. And if you want to be notified when I do upload these videos, upload them for the most part every day. So consider subscribing / following if you want to be notified when I do upload them. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.